every learnable storm spell PvP ranked. We got Ace through D, then we got situational for like if a card is only good in some scenarios or like for certain matchups, it will go in situational and needs a rework. You know, if a card is underwhelming or overwhelming, it might need, you know, a rework. What is up, you guys? It's another guy. Let's get into it. Now, Turmoil only, easy S tier. Amazing, amazing. One of the strongest gambits in the game. If you're able to get it if you're able to get the gambit off, you're basically doing 2310 damage. That is insane for the amount of damage that a single card can do. You know, easy S tier, usable on different strategies and it's even usable in like dual schools like Death, and just like all in all, really solid spell. Glowbugs, I would say needs a rework. Now this is a PvP tier list, so like Glowbugs in PvE I would rank somewhere in like A tier, but like it's definitely like S tier right now because it gets outranked by a lot of other shadow spells, as well as pure damage just isn't that good, and I'll talk about that more when I reach a certain 3-pip card. King Art, A tier. Awesome damage, like 1000 base with a pure split, allowing for easy late game cleanups, because after you hit, if your opponent shields, with the Pierce Blade you could still go for like a kill shot with many of these other spells. Sirens, D tier. It's a -40 mantle, and it also suffers from, because it's an AoE, its damage got nerfed. So basically for 9 pips, you're doing a worse hit than a King Art and a Glowbugs, and all you get is a mantle. Old Sirens was way better. Old Sirens was an enfeeble. Honestly, bring it back. It's already 9 pips. It's already an AoE. Just bring back the enfeeble. This card outranked C tier. Like, it isn't really that good. Honestly, I would say this. I'll put it in rework for now because I do believe that they said that they were gonna add an extra spellman path to this card. So like, you know, other cards. This is like the 170 Wallaroo spell. So definitely watch out for this card in the future. Storm Owl, I would say A tier. Storm Owl, just an incredibly solid hit. It does more than a Turmoil only, but Turmoil only is a gambit, so you might want to use Turmoil over Owl, but if you're not going for gambits, Owl is definitely one of your best hits. So definitely recommend. Healing Current, I would have to say between needs a rework and D tier, because honestly, the main problem with this card is the fact that the heal is just bad. Like, now, Sound of Musicology, I believe this is called, I would give it a B tier. It has the same qualities of King Art, where it hits and it gives you a blade to finish out the game. The problem is that there are so many better shadow spells that you would rather use other than Sound of Musicology. So I'll give it this. Now, this card is either situational or S tier. The reason why. The reason why I put it Sadebolt in situational is because, in theory, it is the best answer to shield Gambits and like shield Roshams. Because this card single-handedly gets rid of 3 shields in a single turn. But the reason why I put it situational is because if it backfires, Storm already doesn't have enough defense to tank, nor enough health. So if this card backfires, you're basically dead. And it has the potential to backfire 3 times, so you essentially just gave your opponent free tempo, an open hit. Why leave the game up to chance? Levy, I would say, is also situational, but a little less so than Insane Bolt. Levy is only really good in a situation where you're trying to stop your opponent from using a Gambit because it removes 2 blades. Other than that, it's not really too good because King Art is better in almost every single way in terms of damage and in terms of closing out the game. But apart from that, like, if you want a card that can remove 2 blades, I guess Levy is pretty good, but like, I would just suggest going for either an off-school Gamb or like an off-school Rosham, and just use Arch Mastery. And Wild Bolt, I would say, I don't know. I would probably put this in like C tier because this card is just a shield breaker that either does 0 damage essentially, or it just does 1,000 damage for free. So if you get lucky, this card does like 1,000 damage, and through a shield, which since you're using this to break shields, you're essentially looking at anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 damage just from this card alone, which is pretty solid. But apart from that, like, it's pretty mid, I would say. It's like, it's okay, but not that good. Very Surprise, S tier. Do I even have to say it? Very Surprise, a low damage hit that also does an extremely good heal. I highly recommend packing max, if not high copies. If it wasn't for this card and another card I'm going to talk about, Storm would not be looking so good. Disarm, I would say D tier, because like Banshee over this card, because at least Banshee weakens your opponent versus this card that just basically sets them to 0. So I would say that this card is pretty okay, not too good. Stormlord, A tier, an extremely good combo card. You can punish your opponent for not going for a stun block. If your opponent doesn't go for a stun block against you, you could easily combo this into either Sound of Musicology, Shad hit, can combo into really strong hits and punish your opponents. Catalan, S tier. Honestly, Catalan again with Very Surprise basically made Storm at the very least playable, because Catalan is one of the few cards that actually gives Storm defensive utility, because it's a hit and it does a minus 35 weakness. Your opponent is most likely not going to hit through that weakness unless they're planning something. So this card just it's just a solid hit overall. It's 5 pips, so it's not too expensive. It's a minus 35 weakness. You could use it if you're a pinch. You could use it just in case you want to survive a hit. Honestly, if Catalan was 4 pips, I would see Storm would just easily spam this, and like I could easily see this overtaking this. But because Catalan is 5 pips, I would say that Very Surprise is just better. This card needs a rework. It's bad. This card, I would say low A, high B tier, because this card's only really good in heal heavy metas. Because this basically what Trident does is it removes 2 heal overtimes for 2 55 blades, and they're chromatic, meaning they essentially are your own school's blades. Extremely powerful. But the main problem is that there are only 2 schools that use heal overtimes a lot in the meta, and that's Storm and Life. Storm isn't in the best position. It's one of the worst schools in the game, I heard right now. I put Astrophobia here. You almost always want more pierce over damage. But I feel like it's one of the most overlooked cards in the game. Now, the reason why Trident is the only card that I have here twice, the Spellbitter and the Dodge Spellbitter, to like a C tier. Honestly, more of like a C tier, because this card, 920 damage, not only that, but 80% accuracy, meaning that you can run less accuracy on a Storm and just use this as one of your big hitters. Anyways, I'm back, everybody. You know, I had to do something really quickly, but we're back. Storm and Myth Prisms, extremely good, because they essentially force your opponent to go for like a spiritual shield to like an elemental shield, or if your opponent goes for something like, let's say, a set shield, now you're forcing your opponent to go for a different set shield. Extremely good for streamers, because if stream snipers don't know that you're packing prisms, they would set a ton of cards for your specific school, but as soon as you use a prism on them, they're forced to tower shield soon, because this card because basically what this effect does it stops your opponent from using single target cards on you. So if you have a minion up and you use something like and you use this card, you're forcing your opponent to go for like an AoE. It's a counter attack. You could also use this on the last round of their auras. It's an extremely good card, but it only works with when you have a minion. And so I wouldn't recommend this card. This card needs a rework. It's basically just you're basically just this card, but you add another pip to it, and it essentially does the same effect. I don't know why they took away the X pips from it. Like, I understand, like, in the minion meta, this card might be a little bit busted, but like, as soon as you get rid of the minion, this effect fizzles. Iron Sultan, honestly, D tier. I'll put him like I'll put Iron Sultan like right here. Ever since, like, you know, cards like Sound of Musicology start getting spell elements and their damage started increasing, because remember, all these spells are their max spell limited versions, which is just like, you know, like anywhere from 50 to 100 extra damage, like roughly. So Iron Sultan is pretty bad when you compare it to like all of the other shard pip spells. It's like extra glow bugs over Iron Sultan because at least glow bugs has damage. Iron Sultan, honestly, I don't want to put it in needs a rework though, because actually no, I would. I'll put it in needs a rework. Just honestly an extremely underwhelming card. Card that gets outclassed by most shads. No, Terrence, I would say A tier because it's not as good. Like, Turmoil Oni is just a better version of Terrence. Terrence uses blades, but because of how prevalent cards like Banshee are and Earthquake, this card has just really lost a lot of its strength. And that just goes for a lot of blade overtimes, or just blade cards in general, like Trident. It's just a free hit through a shield. Dissipate, situational, but one of the best I would say it's right here. Dissipate isn't a particularly, like, you know, strong spell against most wizards, but if your opponent dual schools into Storm / uses stuff like Kraken, or if you're worried about a Trident, you could easily slap on a Dissipate and essentially you don't have to worry about that. If your opponent Krakens, they're losing 4 pips. And especially, and this card hurts dual schoolers a lot, and people who are using meta cards. So honestly, I could easily see this card being like a C tier beat. It's Dissipate situational, but still good. Thundering Djinn, I would also put like beat. I would also put A tier. The reason why I put Thundering Djinn under all of these different cards is because Thundering Djinn is a good hit, but these guys essentially accomplish their roles better. The Turmoil Oni, you could easily hit through a shield and still close out a game with the damage that this has. This card, spammable, good to heal. This card gets you great defensive utility. This card allows you to hit through shields and just like an overall good card. This card, honestly, I would put this card in situational, tied with Pacify, I believe this is called, because this card and Pacify could be used to combo into each other. You basically pacify if your opponent decides not to hit, you immediately sack your minion off for 4 pips. Honestly, again, if they bring minions back, this would just basically be a better empowers in some situations, because this does give more pips than empower. If you use a 0 pip minion, this card is basically just free advantage. This card, D tier. D tier only used for streamers and very toxic gameplay. I feel like these type of single shields should be banned from PvP because they make no type of sense. We already have Ward. Why do we need this in game? This card, I would say D tier above this card. This card sucks so much. This card's an X-Pip spell, doesn't particularly do enough damage, and without enchants, this card's damage is horrible. Like, literally almost every single spell outclasses it. And here's the funny part. Here's the thing. Pip is 80 storm damage. Storm's damage per pip is higher than this. It's like 100. It's like in the hundreds. Why isn't this X-Pip spell in the hundreds? Very bad. This card, I would say, needs a rework. Storm Shark, okay? It's an okay spell, mainly because its damage, while really good, takes a lot of setup, and even the cards that do set it up well, like Tree of Strife and Stormzilla, those cards also require setup and pips. And even if you have the cards, it's gonna take a lot of hand space. Not only that, but your opponent could just shield and weakness you, so you won't have a good chance to Shark. Shark, in my opinion, isn't really that good, because if you want pure damage, go for a Shad or go for like a high pip hit like Trident for more damage, and it's way more reliable. This card, A tier. Do I need to say more? People are willing to run 4 pip hidden bubbles. Break shield, it gives you a damage bubble. It's just an extremely good offensive pressure card. This card, I don't agree with this, but I'm gonna have to put this card in high B tier, almost A tier. This card is extremely good. I've seen other Storm Wizards use this card and they've been doing well with it, but honestly, I don't like this card because I rather just use Catalan over this card almost every single time. This card is just cool. I have a damage overtime, but Infoul is better. This card, S tier, basically bubbles have defined the meta almost every single time ever since its release. Extremely good. Like on the basically the only support spell I would put in S tier, apart from like weakness and the Tower Shield. This card, I would say, needs a rework. Work specifically for PvP. For PvE, this card is just fine. For PvP, this card is just not that good. Rate the Whirlwind, I would put in C tier because there's a card that I'm gonna talk about right after that's just a better version of this card. This card for 3 pips gets rid of 1 overtime, but if it's a protected overtime, you're essentially just getting 2 blades. And again, Banshee extremely good right now. Extremely good. Like with Banshee, this card, and with a certain 3 pip death spell, this card is just not that good. I wouldn't recommend it at all. Kraken. Now Kraken, S tier. Fire can't just go Elf, break your shield, Gambit. I understand why people want Kraken nerf, but at the same time I would have to say that if you do want Kraken nerf, you would either have to make it so it gets rid of 1 protected overtime, that way it's not just the best overtime counter, or make it so that its blades are specific to Storm, or if you want, or I would say better idea, make it so I get rid of a protected overtime, and to make Reap the Whirlwind actually good, make it so I Reap the Whirlwind gives better blades than Kraken, but they're Storm specific. That way they're like, let's say 30 or 40 blades, and Kraken is like 25. So you have the choice of either going with get rid of 1 overtime, but if it's a protected overtime, you just gain 2 blades. Or you can Kraken get rid of that overtime entirely and just gain like Trap, hot take. I would also put in A tier. Because here's the thing, right? Blades are really popular Blades are really bad because of a certain 3 pip death spell. So traps, this card, I'll put it situational, like, you know, I'll put it situational, just a very, I don't like this card because essentially these 2 schools don't really care if you shield, because if you shield against a fire, you're essentially just setting them up, and if you shield against an ice, they just frostbite. Teacup. Now, Teacup goes between B and A. From my personal experience, I would rank it A, but I could see why people would rank it like high B. Because here's the thing. Teacup has incredibly high damage with the fact that with its 2 heal overtime doing roughly 1,000, and since it uses 2 blades, you could use cards like Elemental Blade to get a bladed hit, as well as, although Banshee does counter it, if your opponent does use Banshee, you'll still have at least 1 blade left over to heal with. Not only that, but here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. If you use energy transfer, your guiding lights do not get used for the heal, meaning instead of you getting a bladed single heal, you get a double heal if you energy transfer. So I would recommend using cards like energy transfer instead of using what's it called, blade type cards, because then you'll only get a single heal instead of a double. Since it sets up Shark as well as Thunder Engine, your opponent is gonna play very defensively, allowing you to gain those heals. And on top of that, you can play the game a little bit slower or a little bit more offensive. Storm Bats. Oh, Storm Bats. C tier. Honestly, I'll put it right above Wob. Storm Lightning Bats is a solid card, but it's the same reason why I won't use Reap the Whirlwind. It's because it only gets rid of 1 overtime. Most overtimes your opponent uses are going to be protected. So you're only really going to like break a shield and give your opponent like minus 15 weaknesses, which just aren't as good as Catalan. Like, you just can't compare a 15 weakness to something like a 35 weakness that Catalan has. Catalan is just amazing. To situation. The reason why I put it there is because it's because of what I said about this, is that if you're a streamer and you use the Prism and you kind of just sneak that Prism in their deck when they least expect it, you essentially, even if your opponent packs like 50 different storm counters, you could just put a storm prism, and for the same reason that I put this card in here, I would have to put Thermic Golem by like a situational-ish, because again, fire counters the shields that you put, and ice doesn't care because they could go for like a frostbite to just mitigate the shield. These shields. Gen's Restoration. Gen Restoration takes a heal overtime and turns it into 2 guiding lights, essentially 2 strong guiding lights, and makes this card really, really good because Tree of Strife doesn't use this. Gen's Restoration works really well with it. Oni's Attrition, I believe this is called. I would say again C tier. Gives you defensive utility while getting rid of an overtime, so it's just very, very solid card. Sulka, high B tier. Actually, no. I'll put Rusalka actually high. I'll put Rusalka mid-low A, because Rusalka a very good finisher, but ever since its reworks, it hasn't been as good as it could be. Storm Snake, situational. If you're going up against someone who has a heal overtime, it's good. But why not just pack Storm Beetle? Like, cool, a Storm Snake. Why not just pack Storm Beetle instead? Storm Beetle does what Storm Snake does, but better, because it's not situational. Cleanse Ward. I would put it a little bit above Cleanse. I'll put Divum at situational. Yeah, situational. Because if Divum extended all overtime, that'd be one thing, but Divum is just, he's okay. I'll put Divum above Thunder Snake though. Divum is okay. you basically have to be running like a lot of outgoing on your storm in order for you to actually take advantage of the extra heal. Stormblade, I would put it like, you know, right here, because let me be honest, I haven't really been using Stormblade that much. Stormblade just makes your opponents shit themselves. Because like every time they see Stormblade, they're like, oh no, Stormblade! I have to shield, I have to weakness, I have to stop him from hitting with whatever I can. 2 cards. Dark and Stormy is the main reason why Divum is actually usable. Honestly, I'll put Dark and Stormy at S tier, mainly because Dark and Stormy is one of like the pillars of Storm that allows Storm to actually survive. Dark and Stormy has high damage, an amazing heal, and can swing the game back in your favor by just using it. Honestly, like it's cracked. It's an amazing comeback card. This card, I'm not sure. I haven't really used this card, nor have I really seen people use this card, so I would put it in situational, like right between these two. The reason why is because this card, best case scenario, gives yourself, this card best case scenario is the Moon Life hit, best case scenario, but that's not always the case. So because, you know, it's Storm, it has a little bit of randomness into it. So honestly, I'll just put it in situational, just because we haven't really seen what this card can do. It's underexplored. Stormzilla, I would put in, I'll put in like B tier. The reason why I put Stormzilla in B tier is because if you can't go for blades for Trio Strike, you can instead go for weaknesses for Stormzilla. Not only that, but Stormzilla high damage and the heal is roughly like 100 or so off, which is not that much. And Stormzilla actually gets buffed with other stats like your like an aura or a bubble or a guiding light would actually buff the heal versus Trio Strike, which it won't buff. Queen Calypso needs a rework. This card has been destroyed by King's Isle KI. This card just bring it back to what it used to be. It just gives your opponent a trap and then hits with that at a trap. It used to be good at killing minions, because you would essentially trap your opponent and just kill the minion. As it is right now, this card is just very underwhelming and only used to stop heal spamming. And so, you know, it's bad. This card, Catch of the Day in B tier, just because Catch of the Day has high damage and gives you 245 blades, allowing you to end the game in one fell swoop, or 2 if you hit through a shield or something. Catch of the Day is just an amazing game finisher, and honestly, I would recommend it. But I would say that it's okay throughout the game. It's only really good late game, so I would say it's a pretty great card. Okay, so basically I made a little bit of an oopsie, a little bit of an oopsie. So basically, when I was talking about Jin's Restoration, I meant to talk about Energy Transfer, which is just better Jin's Restoration, and honestly, I would place Jin's Restoration behind Reap the Whirlwind. Reap the Whirlwind is just and because Jin's Restoration actually gives you a heal over time, and I guess I should have guessed it because it's Jin's Restoration. Jin has heals, but right now. So that's the Storm tier list. What do you guys think? Was I wrong? Was I right? And I forgot. What should you place S tier? Which card should you place in situational? What do you think I said too little, or do you think I said too much? Let me know down in the comments. Like the video if you liked it, dislike if you didn't, and if you want to see more tier lists like this, definitely do leave a like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. This took me over an hour to do, so it's another guy.